a podcast hosted by Jody Tree, Joe on the mic, Leader Talk. All right, guys, we are back on another episode, and I'm happy to have on board today Johanna. Did I say that right? I knew I was going to mess it up somehow.
It's okay. It's Johanna. You were close.
Johanna.
Yes, you got it. Perfect.
I like to say Johanna, but there's like a lot of different.
There's so many. There's 8 million ways to say it.
Yeah, exactly. So she first came to Dade County area in 2006 as a Youth for Christ intern with the City Life KIX program.
Yeah, the KIX program, like the cereal.
Okay, so KIX for kids. All right. So it sticks in your brain. The experience of sharing the gospel in a relational context changed the trajectory of her life. She taught in Miami for 2 years before leading Miami's Youth for Christ middle and high school programs in West Homestead. I'm from Homestead. So, Florida City, way down there. So.
Yes. Oh, I love Florida City. I still go to church in Florida City. I love it there.
It's a nice town. It was small, but now it's gotten bigger. So
yeah.
I'm deviating from here. All right. Which in West Homestead, which served an average of 150 low-income youth each year. In 2017, she became the Ministries Director and now oversees a team of 32 staff, 72 volunteers, and 20 ministry sites across Dade County. Awesome. Johanna.
Yeah.
We went through a whole conversation about this earlier. Holds a BA in English and African American Studies from Kenyon College and a master's in education and social change from the University of Miami.
That's right. It's all about the you, baby.
All about the you. She's married to Justin Cox, a high school English teacher, and they are expecting their first child in December 2020. Yay! Yeah, so it's awesome. So, Johanna, tell us a little something about Youth for Christ and what they do to help our youth in South Florida.
Yeah, so our mission is that every kid in Miami-Dade County would have the opportunity to learn about the gospel of Jesus and reach their God-given potential. And so we do that by going where kids are. So that's why we have 20 ministry sites, because we are in detention centers, we're in public schools, we're in low-income neighborhoods, we're in the hip-hop youth culture. Anywhere where kids are, we want to be. We really take that part of the Great Commission seriously, that while we'd love to wait and have the kids come to us, that's probably not going to happen. So just like Jesus had to come to earth, we have to go to where the kids are. And then the other thing that you said when you're describing, telling my story, is we do things in we do things in a relational context. So we call it relational evangelism. So what this means is that we get to know students and we get to know their stories. And then through that process, we get the opportunity to share the story of Jesus with them. And that also cues us up really well when kids do make a decision to follow Christ. We can stay with them and begin the discipleship process. And hopefully we get them connected before they graduate high school to a local church body that can continue the discipling process. So the way one of our staff describes it, which I really liked, is that we are almost like an adoption agency for lost kids. So when kids come into the family of Christ, we're that middleman that not only introduces them to Jesus, but then tries to get them plugged into a long-term spiritual family.
Wow. I am so glad to have you guys on board, because you guys teach and young kids how to be leaders. And that's what I'm so excited about. It's like, when I was growing up, and I just give a little testimony, when I was growing up, my parents, they did their thing. They did what they knew what they knew, not what they didn't know. They were leading, but they had responsibilities beyond just sitting me down and say, all right, little Joe, this is what you need to do to be a leader. And this is how, but you guys are there to bridge that gap, like you said, to invite them into a conversation, build relationships, and be leaders. And that's what got me so excited. But I know you guys, with the hip hop connection? Tell us a little something about that hip hop thing.
Sure. So the ministry that reaches out to kids who are involved in hip hop culture is called Catalyst, and it's unique to Miami. There's no other. Youth for Christ is part of an international organization, so it's in over 120 countries. In the United States, I think we're in over 30 states at this point. So, but that said, this is a unique program because it was started by one of our missionaries, Joel Stegale. And he just had this heart for, as he always said, it was in his heart, it went Jesus, family, and then hip hop in that order. And so he wanted to figure out, how do I bring together Jesus and this hip hop culture that I love? And so the way he did that was very Miami YFC. He found churches and places that would be willing to host him. And he would create this space where kids could come who wanted to break dance, who wanted to MC, rap, if they wanted to experiment with sound development and music. And then if they wanted to do graffiti, we provided we never taught graffiti, but we would provide a legal place for them to express their art. And so he would give kids this place where you could come and freely express yourself. And if you wanted to get involved in the culture, you could learn about it too. But then he would always stop programming at some point, usually around midnight, because these guys like to stay up really late. Yeah. And he would share the gospel. And I remember when I was an intern back in 2006, going to one of Joel's hip hop nights. And I remember walking in, I'm from the Midwest, hip hop culture is not my culture at all. And I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, nobody in here looks like they're going to be super interested in hearing about Jesus. Like, this does not look like the crowd, and shame on me for judging. And so around midnight, around 12:30, the music stops and everybody sits around the breakdancing floor. And Joel gets up and just shares the gospel. 15, 20 minutes. And at the end of that, he asks, does anybody want to make a decision for Jesus? And all these hands around me go up. There's all these young people who desperately want to have a relationship with Jesus. So it totally proved me wrong. And Joel's philosophy was always, and this is still our Catalyst philosophy, that we don't censor the kids who come to us. We don't censor their art, because we don't want them to censor us when we share the gospel. So it can be a little gritty, it can be a little real, but when those kids feel like they have a place where they can be real and express themselves, they're more open to hearing about the God who made them and gave them those creative abilities. So it's a really unique ministry. In the last couple of years, we added a hip hop mobile truck. So it's an Entenmann's. If you are from the Miami area, you know Entenmann's very well.
Yeah, I know too well.
Yes, yeah, my hips know them very well. And so anyway, we converted one of their bread trucks into a DJ hip hop mobile unit. So it's got the dance floor in it, and we can drive it around and take out the dance floor, put up the speakers, and basically in about 30 minutes we can have a whole hip-hop studio on the street. So it's such a great ministry. Joel did sadly pass away in 2016. It was such a shock. He got a rare lung disease, had a lung replacement, and then unfortunately about 6 months after that passed away because of an infection. So what's been amazing, though, is that the legacy has carried on. And so many people, young people, were at his funeral saying, if it hadn't been for Joel sharing the gospel with me, my life would be totally different. So I think that's the beauty of YFC as well, is that it's not just teaching kids that they can have a positive effect in life, but that this message of the gospel will go beyond them and extend beyond them too.
Oh, wow. That is so inspiring and helpful. And so tell us what got you involved in Youth for Christ? Yeah,
it's a great question. Why would someone from the Midwest come to Miami and live in Florida City? I do think, as much as Joe and I like Florida City, I will say to anyone who's listening, Florida City might be kind of like the Nazareth of Miami-Dade. I think a lot of people would say, what good is going to come out of Florida City? And I would say a lot. Yeah, I agree.
Right here.
Exactly. I agree. But so what drew me initially was actually, I was in college and I had done one missions trip to an urban center, actually in Philadelphia, when I was in high school. And it had been a really eye-opening experience because I grew up in kind of a Christian bubble. The town I grew up in, the majority of the town is Christian. I remember going to like when we would have vacation Bible school in the summer, they would tell me I was at a Baptist church, and they'd say, you need to invite your Catholic friends. that was like as unchristian as someone could get. Yeah.
Evangelism, you got to evangelize somehow.
Right, exactly. So then I did this urban 2-week mission trip, and I met kids that had really never heard anything about Jesus. And that just opened my eyes that I don't need to go across the ocean or across the globe to meet people who don't know Jesus. They're literally in my own country. So I went to college, didn't really think about that. And then I was at a conference, and Tony Campolo spoke. And if you know Tony Campolo, he's very inspiring, and he speaks about urban ministry. And I just felt the Holy Spirit saying, you need to spend a summer doing what you did in Philly. You need to give it a longer shot. So good old Google, I just started looking up different ministries, and Youth for Christ was one of them. And so I applied, and that there's a much longer story there, but it was definitely God ordained that I ended up in Miami. It was far on my list of places that I thought I would be. And really what changed when I got here is I had been taught a very proclamational style of evangelism. So street evangelism, and just walking up to somebody and saying, do you know where you're going when you die? And I think that's really important, and there's a place for that. I want to be clear that I think that God uses that in powerful ways. And we see that even in the Old Testament. But what I loved about Youth for Christ is it felt like that missing piece for me, because there was something I felt like I'm a nice Midwestern girl. I walked up to you in the street and asked if you want to know Jesus. You might just humor me and be like, sure, fine. Like, let's go. But when I came to Miami, Youth for Christ was saying, you're actually going to get to know someone, and you're going to share the gospel with them. And then if they reject it, you're going to stay in their life, and you're going to keep walking with them, and you're going to keep trusting that the Holy Spirit's going to work in their life, and you're going to be with them in the ups and the downs. And that just spoke to my soul. That was something that I think, to your point, Joe, about leadership, like, that's what Jesus does for us as the good shepherd. Like, he doesn't just open the gate and say, you're all saved now, you're free. He follows us, and he walks with us. And when we're lost, he searches for us. And so I think that was just so real to me. And so again, had a great summer, life-changing, went back to college, said I'm probably never going back to Miami. And God would not have that. So 4 years later, I was graduating, and my career plans had changed. I knew I didn't want to go into the field of publishing, which is what I thought I was going to do, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so someone from an organization called Teach for America met with me and said, you might want to teach for 2 years. She was a Christian. She actually said that she taught as an expression of her faith, and I really appreciated that. And so I applied, and then when they asked where I got accepted, and they said, would you like to go anywhere? I said, if you guys are in Miami, that'd be great. And they said, we are, and you can go to Miami. And then I got to Miami, and they said, does anyone want to go to Homestead or Florida City? And they said, we need 5 teachers who'd be willing to go to Homestead or Florida City. And I said, I know where the Walmart is. Please send me. I'll be great. So God it was very clear now looking back that God was just tugging me back towards this ministry, and he was very patient and gentle with me. So, yeah.
I mean, the Word of God says that he has drawn us in by his loving kindness. And
that is true.
If it forces us, we'll be very much more resistant. And that goes with relationships too. We're drawn in by loving kindness. Like the example that you said with the hip hop crowd, they come, you draw them in, you love on them, let them be expressive, even though you might not agree. And then you just turn and say, look, this is what I think. And you share that. Keep on loving on them. And I was on another conversation with somebody else earlier, and you touched on it again. It's about building relationships. And in leadership, is for us to be the best leader we can be, and a lot of people don't understand, it's about building relationships with the people you work with. Mm-hmm. You may not like it. It may not be in your what do you call it? Your skill set. But in the end, when you try to build a relationship, because I'm introverted naturally, I'm introverted. You tell me to go do something, I'm a part of a team. I'm just gonna, I'm gonna do it, and I'll be good. But when you're in that leadership capacity, it's about developing relationships, and it took me a while to learn that.
Mm-hmm.
That's why one of the reasons why I'm doing leader talk is because for me to be a leader now that I'm out of the military, what can I do? And I prayed and I asked God, what am I going to do now? And he said, eventually, it was like a month later, he said, why don't you do a podcast? And I'm like, no, no. But he prodded me. And then, but now we're just having great people like you come on board to show the leadership experience. My last question to you before we wrap it up, in your experience in the Youth for Christ, what would you say is the most important thing for leaders to understand to develop that trusted relationship with the next generation?
Yeah, so we talk a lot in Youth for Christ about soul care, and how who you are is more important than what you do. And what we mean by that is not that what you do doesn't matter, but that taking care of your relationship, we call it your abiding relationship with God, is of the utmost importance, because out of the overflow of your heart, everything else is going to come. And so if we're not abiding deeply with God, then we're not going to be able to lead ourselves, much less anyone else. And so we focus a lot on that. We actually require all of our staff to do a quarterly prayer retreat alone with God, to make sure that they're staying connected to God, because it's very easy if you're in ministry, and I don't know if most of your listeners are, but it's very easy to get wrapped up in our vocation, period. But especially when your vocation is ministry, you can kind of feel like, oh, my relationship with God is fine because I'm doing ministry. And in reality, your heart is broken, and you're on the edge of a spiritual heart attack because you've replaced the mission with your relationship with God. So I think, I think that's key. If I could tell a leader to just focus on one thing, it would be, are you abiding with God regularly? Are you staying connected to, if you're familiar with Oswald Chambers, he writes about how you have it's Os Guinness, of Guinness beer fame, but still, he wrote this book called The Call. And in it, he talks about how we have two primary callings as followers of Jesus. That first calling is to be known and loved by God, and to know and love God. And then some of us get a secondary vocation calling, not everybody, but that first calling is for everyone. So that's key for us, is that every leader needs to be leaning into that first call, because your vocational call could change at any point. But that primary calling to know and love God and be known and loved by God is not going to change.
Wow, guys. And what's kind of interesting is that as I've interviewed leaders, gone on like maybe 17 different leaders at different levels, people that were best-selling authors, ministers, they speak around the world, spoke at the UN. The key ingredient that they always say is that understanding their identity in God and how important it is. And right now, and I think that's why I love Youth for Christ, because it all centers around who's your identity. And once you know that you're a child of God, made in his image, that you're precious, you're worth value, because he took time, like you said, he came on the earth, it took time for us to develop a relationship with us, in that he gave his life, the ultimate sacrifice. He's saying you're valuable. No matter what you think you are, you're valuable in his sight. And that's what I love about you guys, that you have a heart and a soul to minister to the youth, even when they're not being so nice, that we minister. And that's how anybody would want to be treated, with the level and decency and respect, to say, I care about you, and we're going to walk with you, even though we might not agree. Know that you're loved.
Yeah, amen. No, and I don't know what you mean, Joe. The teenagers are always lovely.
Yeah. But no, it's so wonderful, and that's why I started participating with you guys, because I saw you guys' heart. And it was back in 2014 when I noticed you guys, and I just started. I did a wild run at the zoo.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, oh, you know what? These guys are great. And they had the hip hop guys up there on
Break
stage. And I
dancing.
was
Yeah.
like, what are they doing? That is so cool. And and I was like, yeah, they got a heart for the next generation. So, and they need to be supported.
Well, thank you for doing the walk. I did. If you do if you do want to come back to Miami, we've swapped the walk. Now we do an over the edge rappelling event.
Yes, I saw that. I'm a little nervous of heights.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's why I did not participate in it.
Well, I will say I've done it twice now, and I'm also not a huge heights fan. But for those who are afraid of heights, I guess the biggest inspiration is one of my mentees grew up in our City Life program. It took her 6 years before she said yes to Jesus. But now she's on fire and in college. It's amazing. But she is mortified of heights. I remember we took her to camp one year, and there was a tree you would climb up. It was about 30 feet up, and then you jump out of the tree. You were harnessed up. You weren't going anywhere. Okay. She made it about 6 feet off the ground and said, "I'm good. I'm done." But she has felt so compelled by the way God changed her life through Youth for Christ that she's now rappelled twice, and she's about to rappel her third time.
Awesome.
So yeah, but she's terrified every year. Every year she gets up to the top and she turns to me and goes, "Why am I doing this?" And I'm like, "I don't know."
Courage is not an absence of fear.
Exactly.
To go for it and do it.
Exactly.
But Johanna, if you could let everybody know where to reach you guys at, and if they want to volunteer, which I highly encourage, that's part of my leadership process, going out there and volunteering, where can they reach you guys at?
Yeah, so our website is miamiyfc.com. We're on Instagram at Miami YFC. And then you can also reach out to us by phone if you prefer, 305-271-2442. And I will say too, Joe, to your point about volunteering, one of the things I love about YFC is one of our key ingredients, we say it's one of our essentials, is adults who empower. And so Youth for Christ hasn't just invested in students, but Youth for Christ has invested in me as a leader. And we do that with our volunteers and with our staff. So I would encourage folks, to definitely volunteer, because I think it'll change your life. But also because we'll pour into you as well, because we know if leaders are healthy, then that will lead kids to Christ. So
that's it. That's what I'm talking about. Mic drop, but I'm not dropping this one because I might break it. But and by the way, I am the original Mr. 305. I don't care about what that other guy says. I was born and raised on it. I'm just kidding. I don't need him.
You come for Pitbull. Don't worry.
But thank you for coming on. It's been an awesome pleasure. And hopefully we'll have you on again. Whenever you have the events again where we can all gather. I wouldn't mind having you guys on so you can advertise it, talk about it. Because I do have, even though I'm in Texas right now, I do have listeners in South Florida and other countries too. But it's been an awesome time. Thank you again.
Thank you, Joe. Really enjoyed it.
All right, guys, that's the end of the episode. If you need to rewind, take some notes, do it. Talk to y'all later.